Emotional maturity is the ability to override a conscious mental reaction to either circumstances or the actions of another person. Simply put, it is the ability to suppress selfishness and act wisely. Easier said than done. Emotional maturity is controlled by a conscious decision. We can make the choice whether we're going to be emotionally mature or emotionally immature. It's kind of like a switch deep down inside of us over which we have complete control to either turn on or turn off. So that switch stays in the on position when we're in public and other people are watching, but we often turn it off when we're with our spouse. Amazingly, we are more emotionally mature with a cashier that we don't even know than we are with our spouse, who means more to us than anybody else in the world. Why would we allow selfishness to reign at home? Because we have a high level of familiarity with our spouse, and like a child, we know we can get away with demanding our own way. We know that we can get away with it. The truth of the matter is, it takes a lot of emotional maturity to say and do the right thing. Last week, we learned that the root of anger is a blocked goal. We also learned that once you identify what that blocked goal is, you should express it to your spouse using feelings words. In other words, expressing the way that you feel things should be going. Well, in this lesson, we will learn the importance of emotional maturity and not always insisting on things going our way. And we're going to begin by doing a quick emotional maturity assessment. So listen to this emotional maturity scale by age. These examples are how people handle conflict, their level of emotional maturity at various ages in life. Age 2, crying, screaming, tantrums. That's the level of emotional maturity for a 2-year-old. Age 10, yelling, rebelling, pouting, defiance, and an inability to reason. That's a 10-year-old. Age 15 gets a little bit better. Interrupting, silent treatment, name-calling, one-upping each other, and creative revenge. Oh, I'll figure out a way to get you back. That's the emotional maturity level of a 15-year-old in conflict. Here's age 20. Outwardly mature, but inwardly resentful and scheming retaliation. So by age 20, there's often a higher level of maturity on the outside, but on the inside, they may be operating on a lower level and scheming retaliation. By age 25, a person should be able to suppress selfishness and act wisely. At first thought, you might think that not every 25-year-old acts that way. No, that's true. There are 50-year-olds that don't even act that way. The point of this scale is just to show the different levels of emotional maturity, how they should be at that stage of life. So when it comes to your level of emotional maturity during conflict with your spouse, based on the scale that I just detailed, and you'll see that same scale in your couples manual, based on that scale, what is your relative age? Take a minute and think about that. Be honest with yourself. And by the way, you're not putting the relative age of your spouse, you're putting your relative age. When you're having conflict with your spouse, when it comes to emotional maturity, what is your relative age? Write that down in your book. Now, once we marry and we launch into society, we're considered to be mature adults by most people's standards. We have mature bodies, we work mature jobs, we have many mature responsibilities such as buying a car, a home, clothing, food, and making a wide variety of mature daily decisions. We're grown. We're considered adults. We're able to maintain our maturity in public, but something very interesting happens when we deal with adversity in the privacy of our own home. We resort to the emotional maturity of a child. Isn't that interesting? Somehow we reach inside of us and flip that switch that's been on all day at work. We flip that switch off. Just as an immature child screams, "It's my turn. You've had 2 turns and now it's my turn." We simply can't resist the temptation to interrupt and demand our way. In the moment, our knee-jerk reaction is to flip the switch off and revert to the level of a 10-year-old. So the end result is that we say things that seriously damage our relationships. And I know people will often go back and say, "I'm sorry for what I said. I shouldn't have said that." And they try and take their words back. And that's a noble thing to do if you've said something wrong. But it's an incredibly difficult thing to erase. The emotional scar is very difficult to heal that fast. So, the more we repeat the immature tantrum, the more our spouse resents us. The more we flip into that 10 or 15-year-old maturity level to handle something, the more our spouse resents us and avoids communication with us, avoids us because we're going to throw that tantrum or simply go off. Even worse is when our spouse responds with the same immature tantrum. Now, that's a sight to behold when a couple really has a knockdown drag out. I have had them in my office or seen them in my office between couples sitting on our couch. It's amazing to watch 2 very mature, highly educated, normally very emotionally mature people click into gear, flip that switch off, and go at it with each other. It's an amazing phenomenon to me. Something that they would never allow to happen in the general public. But when it's with their spouse and the familiarity is there and they know they can get away with it, the fight is on. So the following is an example of the difference between emotional immaturity and emotional maturity. It's very important that you get this concept of emotional maturity. So I'm going to give you first an example, a little short story that is an example of emotional immaturity. A husband and wife have a disagreement that gets out of hand. The husband raises his voice with every rebuttal, and he begins to swear and call his wife demeaning names. And he eventually walks away, just refusing to resolve the issue. That night, when the 2 of them go to bed, the husband, who is normally very affectionate, refuses to touch his wife, even though he knows her love language is physical touch. It might be as though he builds an invisible barrier down the center of the bed. He's not going to even so much as touch her. It's as if he's withholding her desired affection in order to punish her for not giving in to his argument. This is further punishment. Is he thinking these thoughts? I'm going to punish her this way? Probably not. But subliminally, that's what's happening. This is another way for him to communicate, you were wrong. The wife loses respect for her husband. She is emotionally scarred by his name calling. She feels as though he doesn't care about her feelings. She begins to resent him, and she also begins to associate negative feelings with going to bed with him. If you remember in previous lessons, we talked about the theory of association, how we return to pleasure and we avoid pain. If we associate our spouse with good feelings, we want to be with them. If we associate them with bad feelings, we want to avoid them. So because of this treatment at night, she begins to associate negative feelings with going to bed with her own husband. So because of his emotional immaturity, the husband loses the respect of his wife and undermines his leadership in their home. So in effect, his emotional immaturity has sabotaged his own goals. The very goals that he wanted to attain, he has sabotaged himself because of his inability to be emotionally mature. Here's the same example from the perspective of emotional maturity. A husband and wife have a disagreement and it starts to get out of hand. The husband lowers his voice, identifies the root of his and his wife's anger, and begins to use the live technique to talk it out. That's a tough thing to do when the heat is on, when the emotions are raging. It's a very difficult thing to do, to say, okay, now look, we've been given a technique in this program to use, so let's use it. That is a challenge, I'll admit that. But what it takes to do it is a lot of emotional maturity. It's to be grown in the moment, to be an adult and have the emotional maturity to say, let's do what's right. Let's handle this the right way. That night, when the two of them go to bed, the husband cuddles his wife even though he's still a little bit upset about the disagreement. I'm not saying that it's going to erase any hard feelings or any disappointment. I'm just saying that even in spite of that, he doesn't withhold his affection from his wife. He is confident that his views were clearly communicated in their talk, and that giving her the affection she desires does not negate his stand on the issues they discussed. That takes a lot of maturity. To still be affectionate and know that I made myself very clear and what I said still stands. But now I'm not going to be, emotionally immature like a 10-year-old and withhold what I know is important to you now just because I'm mad at you. I'm going to be emotionally mature and give you the affection that I know that you desire. So this, by giving her the affection that she desires, it's another way to communicate to her, even though we disagree, I love you, I accept you, and I will always be here for you. That takes a lot of emotional maturity to say that even though I'm upset about this, I'm still going to do the right thing. As a result, the wife increases in respect for her husband. You may not see it immediately, but something deep down inside of her says, this man takes care of me. He loves me, even when he disagrees with me. Even when he's upset with me, he's always there for me. She is also emotionally comforted by his affection and willingness to work things out. That's a very positive statement to this wife, to know that he is willing to work things out. She feels as though he genuinely cares about her feelings, and she associates positive feelings with going to bed with him. Even though we had a disagreement this afternoon and we talked it out, and even after talking it out, we had to agree to disagree on some things. Going to bed with my husband is still a positive experience. So she doesn't begin to associate negative feelings. She maintains her positive feelings, knowing that no matter what happens throughout the course of a day, at the end of the day, my husband is there for me. So because of his emotional maturity, the husband gains even stronger respect from his wife and increases his leadership in their home. In effect, his emotional maturity has helped him attain his own goals. So, in those two examples, you can see clearly the difference that emotional maturity makes in a situation. King Solomon, who God called the wisest man of all, had much to say about emotional maturity. Here are a few of his proverbs concerning this topic. Here's the first one. The heart of the righteous studies how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours forth evil. Doesn't that second part sound like somebody that's emotionally immature? They can't resist. They can't hold back. Their mouth pours forth evil. Ugly names, hard statements, absolutes. They just can't hold it back. Their mouth pours forth evil. Here's another one. He who has understanding spares his words, and a man of understanding is of a calm spirit. So, if you have understanding, wisdom, you might say emotional maturity, you're going to spare your words and have a calm spirit. Here's another one. Even a fool, this is one of my favorites, even a fool, when he holds his peace, is counted wise. And that he shuts his lips is esteemed, he's esteemed as a man of understanding. So it's like if you don't know what to say, if you can't think of something emotionally mature to say, just close your lips and say nothing. Your chances are greater by saying nothing of being esteemed wise and a person of understanding. Just don't say anything. Now, I'm not talking about giving your spouse the silent treatment. We've been through all of that. We know that that's not healthy. I'm just saying that when the immaturity kicks in and the nasty words, the ugly words start to shoot out your mouth, have the wisdom to close your mouth and not say them. Take a minute to think. Here's another one. The discretion of a man makes him slow to anger, and his glory is to overlook a transgression. His glory is to overlook a transgression. Listen, I would recommend that all of us, get used to taking wrong from time to time. Even when you're not wrong. Just get used to saying, okay, I'll take bad on that one. I think we have mentioned before that the great majority, I would say in the 90% plus percentage range of marital arguments are not huge things. They're small, little itty-bitty things. How long it's going to take to get us into the restaurant, or who strapped the car seat in last. It's not strapped in properly. It was you. No, it wasn't you. It was me. It's always something silly. So really, what's the big deal about taking wrong on one of those? Just take wrong. 9 times out of 10, the natural process of time bears out that you weren't wrong. My wife says we're supposed to go to the light and turn right. I know we're supposed to turn left, but I'm going to take wrong. I'm going to say, okay, we turn right. 3 to 5 minutes later, she's saying, this doesn't look familiar, so it's obvious that I was right and she was wrong, and I didn't have to say anything. Get used to taking wrong. It will pay off in the long run, I assure you. The fool vents all of his feelings, but a wise man holds them back. Wow. Now, the word fool is kind of hard, so I wouldn't want to call anybody a fool. But let's say that the emotionally immature vents all his or her feelings, but a man or woman with emotional maturity holds them back. There is a lot of wisdom in watching what you say. Jesus gives a compelling argument for emotional maturity in Matthew 12:36. Listen to this. This is Jesus speaking. He says, "But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." How serious is that? How serious is that? You will give an account for every word in the day of judgment. So it's so easy just to spew these venomous and poisonous words out at our spouse now, but we're gonna be held accountable for every one of those in the day of judgment. That puts a lot of weight, a lot of importance on our ability to shore up, to keep that switch on, in the on position, and be emotionally mature. So over the past 3 weeks in this program, you've been given several principles and techniques, such as the hierarchy of priorities. You remember that one? The importance of hearing from God. We covered that. The 3 levels of communication and the importance of getting down to the level, that big mass of iceberg underneath the water, the level of our feelings and communicating them. We've covered all of that. The live technique, which is an excellent technique to free up communication and talk things through between a husband and wife. And also, we covered understanding and expressing anger. These are all tools, so to speak, that have been put in your toolbox over the last 3 weeks. The question is, are you applying them to your marriage? I have found at this point in week 4 that it's common to learn that couples are not actually using the techniques. So I will ask a couple, I'll hear a couple talking about a disagreement they had that week, and I will say, did you get to the root of anger? Did you find out what the block goal was? Well, no, I didn't do that. Did you by any chance, the two of you sit down and use the live technique to talk it through and get to the bottom of it? Well, no, we were too hot. And I can see clearly that there's a need for a lesson here at week 4 on emotional maturity. In Mark chapter 4, Jesus gives a parable. Some call it the parable of the sower, others call it the parable of soils. But it basically says that the sower sows the seed, which he later tells his disciples is the word. And some of it falls on the wayside, some of it falls on the stony ground, some on the thorny ground, and some on good soil. And he says that falls on the wayside, the enemy comes in and snatches up quickly. Doesn't even allow it time to take root. And I would equate that to those of you that you hear the lessons, and by the time you get to the door of the facility where you're having your meetings, the enemy has already stolen that from you. He's already taken it. But by the time you hit the door, you have let go of it. This stony ground, Jesus says, there's a little bit of dirt on the stone, so the seed takes root and springs up fast. But because there's no depth of earth, no nourishment for the root and the sprout, that when the noon sun comes out, it can't take the heat and it dries up and dies. That I would equate to those of you that in week 2 you were saying, we're good. we're all better. This program's awesome. We're all better. Week 2. That concerns me a little bit, actually. I mean, it sounds wonderful in the moment, but it's a little concerning because I'm thinking there may not be the depth of root there. I would be very concerned that after you feel like everything is all better, that you kind of go on autopilot, and then when the trouble comes, it kills you because you didn't have any real depth of root for nourishment. The thorny ground, the interesting thing to me about that is that the soil seems to be good. The seed takes root and actually begins to grow. But the cares of life, the thorns, they grow up and they begin to choke out the plant and kill it. And I would equate that to those of you who are actually taking the principles, trying to use them in your marriage. You're trying to apply everything. The seed has taken root and it's beginning to grow, but all of your extenuating circumstances are cropping up and choking the life out of the progress, out of the fruit that has been produced by this program. Those thorns can be all kinds of things. Blended family issues, extended family issues, job issues. I could go on and on, but they're just the cares of life are choking it out. And then there's the fourth soil, and that is the good soil that Jesus said will receive the seed, allow the roots to go down deep for nourishment, and will produce a plant that in turn reproduces good fruit. And even at that, Jesus says, even the ones that really get it, you don't know how much fruit they'll produce. He says some 30, some 60, some 100-fold. Now, if you thought you were predestined to be one of those categories of ground, it could be very depressing. You could say, well, our marriage is the thorny ground, so there's no hope for us. The cares of life are going to choke it out. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a minute. I actually believe that you get to choose which kind of ground you are. You get to choose. And if you see in your circumstances that you are the thorny soil or the stony ground or the wayside, you have the ability to choose to become the good soil, to actually take these principles and apply them. They are seeds of truth. And when you receive them and apply them to your marriage, it will produce truth. It will produce life. It will produce health. So the question again is, are you going to have the emotional maturity to apply them? The couples that do well in this program are the ones that have the emotional maturity to lay down their selfishness and apply what they have learned. So, I want to give you 2 challenges for this week. The first is to leave your emotional maturity switch in the on position when interacting with your spouse. Refuse to reach down like a 10-year-old and flip it off. Leave your emotional maturity on. And number 2, have the emotional maturity to work on yourself and allow your spouse to work on his or herself.